we want to move on to a conversation about something that's happening here in our state. It's broader throughout the country, but it has some implications right here at home now. While we're waiting for the live events, we want to discuss this issue of tax on tips, okay? We all know Illinois is a high tax state with one of the nation's largest property tax burdens, especially. And when those property tax bills came out just a few weeks ago, we pulled in the Cook County treasurer, the assessor. If you were watching us, we tried to get as many different perspectives as to what was going on there. One of the biggest points of contention was how the burden shifts from one group of people to another, or one area of Cook County to the next. The same argument could be made for carving out one industry. So Illinois is adopting the new federal no tax on tips provision. And here to make sense of it all, Manish Bhatt, he is a senior policy analyst for the Tax Foundation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So explain the new federal exemption and how it came to be, first and foremost.
Yeah, so the federal exemption, the deduction, is part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and a lot's been written, a lot's been said about that from my organization and others. And importantly, it fulfilled one of the campaign promises to not tax tips and overtime income. And states around the country are really wrestling with how to deal with this and whether or not there's revenue in the or revenue limits that are going to allow for this. And several states have decided to either decouple from this provision of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act or to not implement it, depending on how the state defines income.
And how is it that Illinois can opt out?
So Illinois, only those states that define income at the state level using federal taxable income as the definition have it immediately incorporated into their tax codes. Those states would have to decouple. Illinois uses adjusted gross income as its definition of income and therefore can choose whether or not to adopt the policy.
Now, you've said that while not taxing tips may sound attractive to workers, selective exemptions distort the tax code. How is that?
Well, whenever you selectively preference one group of taxpayers over others without adjusting the budget or adjusting spending, you're just shifting the burden onto another group. We see this, as you mentioned, in property taxes, and we're seeing this here. To say nothing of the fact that two individuals making roughly the same amount of money, living in the same city, could pay dramatically different income taxes based solely on the nature of their income. If the individual is earning tipped income, they would be able to take advantage of this deduction. The individual not earning tipped income would be paying a much higher tax bill. So that's a real stark example of two similarly situated taxpayers that have dramatically different tax bills only because of the way they're paid.
Really interesting. And then how could that, I guess, be manipulated even from an employer standpoint?
Yeah, there's no question that these sorts of incentives on tipped income or even overtime income might shift the way employers seek to pay their workers as an enhancement or an inducement to stay or retain or even hire new recruits under the promise of a no tax on tips. It's not good policy. There's better ways to structure income taxes, and states around the country would do well to follow the example of sound tax policy, low rates, broad bases, without carve-outs and incentives like this.
I want to loop back around to that in a moment here, but do you foresee this being an issue come tax filing time?
That is a great question. I do. I do, in fact, see this as a potential problem. And it's not because taxpayers would be seeking to not pay their taxes. It would be under this federal provision, they might not think to include that income on their state income tax forms. And so you might end up seeing taxpayers either unintentionally avoiding taxation or having to hire a professional preparer when they otherwise wouldn't need to.
Yeah. So going back to your statement about good policy, you said that this is an example where good politics doesn't always make good policy. What are some of the reforms that maybe are more widely accepted or that are just needed?
Well, you hit the nail on the head with respect to Illinois' complicated tax system. Certainly can be more competitive regionally and nationally. And when it comes to income taxation, or really any taxation, the idea should be keeping the rates as low as feasible and the base as broad as possible. We can have a higher standard deduction, for example, that might allow relief for the lowest income taxpayers while not providing a carve out for some. And so there's a host of opportunities out there, but carving out a relatively small portion of the population that might benefit the most from this without extending further relief to more taxpayers is a step in the wrong direction. And I will say the legislation has been introduced through legislation in a number of states. And even though the benefit is poorly targeted, it's important to keep in mind that workers in the bottom half of hourly wages, only 4% of those are in tipped professions. So if we're really trying to provide relief to low-income taxpayers, this is not the way to do it.
Really? Okay. And I guess maybe the flip side of that, do you think this will maybe encourage people to tip more?
I certainly don't know. That'd be a behavioral economics question. Certainly anything is possible.
Yeah. All right. So just on a final note here, are there some other changes this year that we should all prepare for come tax season that we can maybe talk about now?
Generally, I think all the provisions of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act are going to impact states and taxpayers around the country differently. What we're seeing very acutely in places like Cook County and in Illinois and around the country is this property tax revolt, and that is overshadowing some real reform efforts. But the implementation of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, state budgeting, and revenue forecasting, I think is gonna be a big topic of conversation during legislative sessions in Illinois and elsewhere.
All right, we'll keep our ears open for that. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.